in New York, and to those of you on live stream, hello as well. Everybody in New York, turn around, say hi to everybody else wherever they are. It's great to see you this evening. Has everybody had a nice week? Good feelings about 2017? Yeah? All right. Please introduce yourself to the people who are around you, to your right, to your left, in front of you, and behind you. You ready? All right. Let's all take a deep breath and close our eyes. We see in the middle of our mind a little ball of golden light. And we watch this light as it begins to grow, larger and larger, until now it covers the entire inner vision of our mind. And we see for ourselves within this light a beautiful temple. And we see a garden that surrounds the temple and a body of water that flows through the garden. We see that the inside of the temple is lit as well by this same beautiful golden light. And here we are, for we have been drawn together by the power and in the presence of God. We devote our time spent together tonight, all of our experiences together, to Him. And we pray that His most Holy Spirit be upon us, lifting us above and beyond the turmoil, the limitations, and the fears of this world to the endless love and peace that lay beyond. And so it is, together, we all say, Amen. I want to begin with reading a paragraph from page 668 in the text of the Course in Miracles, which says, "My brothers in salvation, do not fail to hear my voice and listen to my words. I ask for nothing but your own release. There is no place for hell within a world whose loveliness can yet be so intense and so inclusive, it is but a step from there to heaven. To your tired eyes, I bring the vision of a different world, so new and clean and fresh, you will forget the pain and sorrow that you saw before. Yet this a vision in which you must share with everyone you see, for otherwise you will behold it not. To give this gift is how to make it yours, and God ordained in loving kindness that it be for you." You know, it was actually the night before New Year's Eve. I was at a dinner party. And after dinner, one of the guests said, "Why don't we go around the table and everybody say, what is it that you want to give up this year? And what is it that you want new for next year?" And I was struck by how many people who were at the table said that what they wanted to give up was fear. That fear was what they wanted to not be taking with them into the year 2017. And I thought about that, obviously, in terms of what the Course in Miracles has to say, because the Course in Miracles talks about fear a lot. It is part of the fundamental philosophy of A Course in Miracles, because the basic teaching of the Course is that love is real and nothing else exists, meaning that when our mind is thinking with love, we are literally co-creating with God, and God is that which is eternal and changeless. But when we are thinking without love, because God is all there is, when we are thinking without love, we're actually not thinking, we're hallucinating actually. This entire three-dimensional reality. Either the experience of the world that we know is one of love, in which it is literally a co-creation with God, or we are experiencing a vast illusion which feels very real while we're in it, but is actually not real because only God is, and what is all-encompassing can have no opposite. The Course in Miracles says that thought, when it is not loving, when we are not extending love, i.e. extending the thinking of God, i.e. being our authentic selves, since we ourselves are thoughts in the mind of God, we are projecting fear. The Course in Miracles says that there are only two emotions, love and fear. That which is not love is fear. Any thought which is love produces peace. Any thought which is not loving produces fear. And then fear has many different categories: anxiety, despair, depression, and so forth. So the Course in Miracles tells us that fear is to love what darkness is to light. Darkness is not actually a thing. It is the absence of a thing. When they come into the church and it's dark in here, they don't get baseball bats out and start trying to hit the darkness. Rather, they turn on the light, because in the absence of the light, the fear disappears. The darkness disappears. Similarly, when the mind is used for the purposes of love, in that moment that my mind is being used for the purpose of love, I cannot fear. Now, we live in a society, the very prevailing paradigm of which, and this is not just true to our society, because in a larger sense, it has to do with a thought system that has ruled humanity's consciousness for ages. That thought system, whether we're talking about the one that has dominated the human race for ages, or whether you are specifically honing in, as it is easy to do, on the peculiarities of this American go-get-'em attitude, is an absolute font of fear. It is an absolute fear-producing machine, because everything that we're told about who we are and what our purpose is on the planet is a maelstrom, is a matrix of thought that is bound to produce fear. Why is that? Because, number one, we're taught that we're separate from each other. We're taught that we are bodies. That itself is a fearful thought, because in fact the Course in Miracles says your body is just a suit of clothes. The real you is not body but spirit. Your body was born, your body will die, but we, the Course in Miracles says, the birth is just not the beginning, it's just a continuation of our eternal life. Physical death is not an end, it's just a continuation of our eternal life. So we're taught that we're only here for this instant. So that's a lot of pressure right there in terms of what we have to get done in a certain period of time. But also being taught that we're bodies, we're taught that we are separate from each other. The Course in Miracles, and you've heard me say this many times, that image that's so powerful in the Course, where it says that we are like sunbeams to the sun, thinking we're separate from other sunbeams. We're like waves in the ocean, thinking we're separate from other waves. Now think about the psychological difference between seeing yourself as a wave separate from the rest of the ocean versus thinking of yourself as a wave that is one with the rest of the ocean. If I think of myself as a wave that's separate from the rest of the ocean, how can I not be terrified of all the other waves? How can I not be terrified of the ocean? How can I not be terrified that at any moment I will be obliterated? Other waves will be bigger than me. Other waves will swallow me up. If, on the other hand, I think of myself as one with the wave, then I know I'm one with the ocean, one with the other waves, one with the ocean. The power of the ocean is mine. The ocean moves, I move, this ocean moves. So if I relate to myself as like one with the ocean, I feel like what I am, the most powerful force on the planet. On the other hand, if I think of myself as one little wave, how could I not live in terror? And that is how we are. If I think of myself as separate from you, I cannot not fear you. I will fear that you are dangerous to me on some level. I fear what you might do to me. I fear that you will engulf me. Or I fear that you will abandon me. I fear you. I feel I have to compete with you. So you, who are the rest of the human race, become an object in which I perceive myself as separate. And the perception of ourselves as separate, that is the ego mind. The mind which knows I am one with you is a mind that knows that although my physical senses tell me I am separate from you, my physical senses are not the arbiter of ultimate reality. The physical senses are not the arbiter of ultimate reality because they reflect back to me evidence of the three dimensions, and the three dimensions themselves are illusion. As Einstein said, albeit a persistent one, but an illusion nonetheless. So the three dimensions, to say, and the Course in Miracles points out, you see an airplane and takes off from the runway, and the further away it gets, the smaller it gets. So you have all kinds of evidence that just the fact that my physical senses see it doesn't mean it's happening quite the way my physical senses perceive. And enlightenment is a shift in self-identification from body identification to spirit identification. Body identification is the ego mind. The ego mind will tell me I am separate from you, and only fear can result from that. Now, not only does the ego mind tell me that I'm separate from you, that makes life seem dangerous right there, because there's so much that can destroy me. There is so much that I have to fight for. But it also tells me that my purpose on the earth is to go out there and do whatever I want to do. You know, go out there, you gotta survive, you gotta make it, you gotta take the bull by the horns. Once again, this is the thinking we're taught. This is the prevailing kind of American mantra. Go out there, you can do it. Now, there's an upside, definitely, to the whole notion of enlightened individualism and rugged individualism. There is an upside to that. But the downside is when it's used for the ego mind for the ego's purposes. Now, remember, the way the mind operates, the Course in Miracles says, is that it is as though the mind has been split in two. One part of the mind is the truth of who you are, and it remains in contact with God at all times, because being an idea in the mind of God, you actually cannot be separate from the mind of God. However, living on this earth leads us to believe and to experience ourselves as separate from God, because our thinking tells us that we are not one with the universe, and our thinking based on our physical senses does not reflect back to us anything other than that we are here as isolated individuals. Now, when I'm thinking I'm an isolated individual, any thought that stems from that will give me fear. I got to go out there and do it. I don't know what's going to happen in 2017. I don't know how I'm going to get a job. I don't know if I'm going to have a relationship. I don't know what Trump's going to do. I don't know what's going to happen. And you live in constant fear. And it makes us weak. And it leaves us out of our power. And it's all about how we got to go make it happen in 2017, although in a very ironic way, the very concept that I got to go out and make it in 2017, because the thinking which produces that thought is itself such a weak one. The more I have this thought that I have to go out there and do it in 2017, the less I am probably going to be able to. Or even if I am able to, it will come with a high personal cost, because I'm always like this. I'm always like this. And that's how most of us live today. Always like this. They're going to get me, or I won't have enough of this, or I won't have enough of that. And actually that disempowers us. Now, the Course in Miracles says salvation begins when you consider the possibility that there might be another way. And what is salvation? You know, because in this section I read, it says, my brothers in salvation. What is there to be saved from? What is there? I'm saved. What is there to be saved from? I'm saved from my own neurotic thought patterns. That's the only thing to be saved from. Everything that we experience is a product of our thinking. So if you want to be saved from the effect, you have to be saved from the cause. The cause is your own insanity. Like they say in AA, your best thinking got you here. The whole human race, hello, your best thinking got you here. The thinking that we think, or they say in AA also, stinking thinking, right? So you realize that if you want your life to change, you change the level of effect by changing the level of cause. You are saved from the craziness of the mental habit patterns that dominate this planet. That's why the miracle is a shift in perception from the thoughts of fear to the thoughts of love. And that's that you take a very different approach to a new year. You don't say, okay, this is what I want to make happen in 2017. First of all, that whole I want to go out and make it happen thing, got to go out and take the bull by the horns. That's a pretty suicidal thing to do, taking the bull by the horns. The Course in Miracles, the entire paradigm is more like there are angels pushing you from behind. In the Talmud, in the Jewish Book of Wisdom, it says that over every blade of grass, there is an angel, and the angel is whispering, grow, grow, grow. That the universe, natural intelligence, somebody gave me a bulb, right, at Christmas. And every day you watch this thing open. Nature is so amazing. My daughter and I were just in awe of it. It starts as just this bulb, and then you have these extraordinary flowers. That's how nature works. Nature is intentional. Nature is intentional in that DNA of the embryo to become the baby, in the acorn to become the oak tree, in that bud to become the blossom, and in you to become the man you're capable of being, and you to become the woman that you are capable of being. We have spiritual DNA. But the issue is not only that that natural intelligence works, it's not only that God's plan works, but the opposite is true. Yours doesn't. Now that's a big deal. Because when we go out there to do and make it happen, particularly when we're coming from fear of what might happen if we don't, meaning that our core belief is that it's a dangerous world. So on one level or another, it's going to be a dangerous world. And you're going to constantly, I know people like that, they live like this. It's always this. I got to be afraid of the relationship. I got to be afraid of the job thing. I got to be afraid. I'm professionally afraid. I'm personally afraid. It's just we live in this constant state of fear. And then even if you get it together this way or you get it together that way, then it starts to take a toll on your body. And we see the craziness with which we're living totally as a human race. Salvation begins when we consider the possibility that there must be another way. That is what the spiritual path is. It's another way. I said to a friend of mine the other day, we were talking about this kind of stuff, and I said, well, you have to just give your life to God to guide. And he said, I know, I've been giving my life to God. How do you do that? And I thought about the Course in Miracles because the Course is a very practical course. This is a how-to. It's a how-to in the sense of how to think. So you wake up in the morning. One of the exercises in the Course says that we are to say every morning, what would you have me do? Where would you have me go? What would you have me say, and to whom? Now, we're taught, go out there, figure out what you want, and go for it. Once again, this produces fear, because how can you know what's best? How can you know what's going to happen tomorrow? How can you know which person would be best, which job would be best? And that's why we're all living in fear. Instead, there's this notion that the same natural intelligence guides the embryo to a baby. An embryo doesn't have to say, I will become a baby. I will become a baby. And it doesn't have to say, I can make this happen. I can make this happen. There is a natural intelligence that guides even from the time of the first sperm and the first egg coming together. And then through this awesome natural process, these cells emerge. These cells are filled with the natural intelligence. They are guided to collaborate with each other, to become that which they are in order to collaborate with other cells, in order to become a brain, in order to become fingers, in order to become lungs, in order to become heart, and so forth. In fact, when a cell goes insane and loses its natural intelligence, disconnects from its natural intelligence for some reason, and goes off to do its own thing, I'm not thinking about collaborating with other cells to serve something higher than both of us and bigger than both of us. No, I'm going to go over here and do my own thing. I got to find people. I got to find other cells who can join with me and do our own thing. That's called a tumor. It is malignant. It is malignant. I don't even know what's funny about that. It is malignant in the body, and it is malignant in consciousness. It destroys. When you go off just to do your own thing because you want to, it doesn't lead you to happiness, and it doesn't even lead you to success. Because even if it leads you to some kind of worldly success, because the core belief is still, it's just about me, it's all about me, it's all about me, then you're not dwelling in a universe of peace. And sometimes people will say, well, but if I make all that money, see, or if I have that professional success or whatever it is, then I will get the things that make me happy. But the truth is the opposite. Find your peace and find your happiness, and success comes naturally. Why? Because you just happen to have genius in you. Because God placed it in all of us. Every cell in the body, nature is a perfect ecosystem. Nature is a perfect ecosystem, not only outside, but also inside. I notice that as a mother, how childhood is this perfect ecosystem. Relationships are a perfect ecosystem. An ecosystem is where, when all parts are allowed to follow the way of nature, they all fit together in perfect ways. And so when we may say something like, may God's will be done, don't kid yourself. May God's will be done means may God's love, will, thought prevail. If I say in a relationship, may God's will be done, that means may I see them through the eyes of love, and may they see me through the eyes of love. My love is my natural intelligence. That person's love is their natural intelligence. May this person not see my guilt. May I not see their guilt. May they not see their guilt. May I not see my guilt. That we might see each other truly. In any situation, in any business project, you go into it. You have a book you want to write. You have a business you want to start. You have any project that you're working on. May God's will be done. May God's will be done. You know, we have these thoughts that become these kind of platitudes like just get out of the way. But I think a lot of us feel, how do you do that? Before I started the Course in Miracles, when people would say to me, just let it go, Marianne, that would just make me more hysterical. Let it go to what? I thought, what, just let it go to randomness and chaos? But what you learn is that the ego is the mind of randomness and chaos. Now, the ego, however, does not show up in your life saying, hi, I'm your self-hatred. No, 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 no. It doesn't say, hi, I'm the part of your mind, which would tell you that you're not who you actually are, that you are who you actually aren't, which would totally give you a completely insane perspective on pretty much everything, lead you to a life of struggle and despair, have you win sometimes just enough to keep you in the game, but basically sabotage everything, and then at a certain point, you'll get sick and you'll die. That's what the ego mind is. And we keep thinking, maybe if I partner with the ego just one more time. The spiritual path is a radical departure. It is a radical shift. It's a radical shift into, God, use me. Use my hands, use my feet, use my intelligence, use my past, use my present, use me where I get it right, use me where I get it wrong. Come over my mind, guide me, show me where I get it wrong. When I'm tempted to judge, put me back on track. When I'm tempted to control, put me back on track. When I'm withholding forgiveness, put me back on track. When I'm not seeing myself clearly, put me back on track. When I'm not seeing other people, put me back on track. When I'm not being responsible to myself or others, put me back on track. You, divine intelligence, know that I am mentally schooled in the ways of neurosis and pathology. And I am constantly, as the Course in Miracles says, the ego speaks first and the ego speaks loudest. So prayer is the medium of miracles because you are requesting help. You don't have this thought that you can handle it by yourself. Once again, going back to AA, this idea that your life has become unmanageable. One of the reasons, I'm not an addict in terms of substance abuse, but there is one truth spoken in many different ways. And 12 steps is one of those spiritual paths that comes right from that mind of divine intelligence. And so the principles, just like the principles of A Course in Miracles or any other serious spiritual path, they're all one. And this idea of complete surrender in knowing I can't do this. So the entire way of the world is got to go out there and do it. The way of surrender is I can't. I don't even have how would I know how to do it? You don't hold the stars up in the sky. And that's really the message here. The message is you can let the power that keeps the planets revolving around the sun run your life. Or you can do it yourself. So the idea is realizing that if left to my own devices, I will blow it. And that's why you come to realize that the spiritual path is not the life of sacrifice. It's not a life of some goody-goody. It's not a life of I want to be a good girl so that after I die I go to heaven. No, 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 no. It's I want to be sane so that the rest of this day I will not be totally in despair and anxiety and neurosis and craziness. And I won't blow it and I won't sabotage. And I won't make a fool of myself and I won't all that. You realize that the ego mind is not this mind that says, well, you got to take care of yourself. There's a lot of that in the world today. You got to take care of yourself. Well, the Course in Miracles is real big on pointing out that there's a difference between self with a little s and self with a big S. So what the ego mind means when you got to go out there and take care of yourself, right, is actually usually means, if you take a brutally honest look at your life, that you did something thinking at the time it was taking care of number one, and then you see later it didn't take care of number one. It totally set you up for failure. It set other people could smell it. Other people didn't like it. Other people didn't want to help you. Because you didn't come across like a person in healthy self-care. You came across selfishly. You came across like somebody who was not really there for the right reason. See, everybody knows everything on a subconscious level. Everybody is always communicating with everybody subconsciously. That's why we point out all the time, you know, this world says, you know, you got to have the resume, you got to have the ability, you got to have the experience. We were talking about that the other day. But really, you know what? There will always be somebody whose resume is as good as yours. There will always be somebody whose connections are as good as yours, whose talent is as good as yours, as intelligence as high as yours. There will always be somebody. And those things, I'm not saying they're not important in life, but they are not the winning edge. The winning edge in life is when you're carrying something. And it's actually where the word charisma came from. Charisma comes, it's a spiritual concept. It means of the light, you've just got something else going on. The Course in Miracles talks about a light in your eyes. And when you have that light in your eyes, because what's being reflected back to you, see, the Course in Miracles defines light as understanding. So when you quote unquote see the light, you understand. The enlightened are those who understand. What is there to understand? That this world is not what we think it is. This is not this low-level thing where we're all just stuck here randomly into this chaotic universe trying our best to get what we can in the little time we have allotted to us. The enlightened understand that we are here to serve the ages. This is not just about you, and that's really a key for 2017 in the political situation. This is not just about you. This is about a much bigger picture in terms of what America means in the world. It's a much bigger picture than just any one generation. It's about a long line. We are called to answer to history. We are here to serve our ancestors. We are here to serve generations after us. When your thinking is just lifted to that, it's all about lifting. It's like when you look at the architecture in a church, or you look at the architecture in a synagogue, or you look at the architecture in a mosque, it's always pointing you upward, 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 upward. Point to the big picture, not just you. It's not just you. The best advice anyone ever gave me, the best advice I ever give myself when I'm off is get over yourself. And yet this world tells us the opposite of that. Make it about you. When you go into a situation and it's all about you, it doesn't attract other people. It doesn't attract other people to want to help you. It doesn't. The way to stand charismatically in any situation, and you can't fake this, it's not just behavioral modification. I mean, a behavioral shifts emerge from it, but the behavioral shifts emerge from a different kind of thinking, which has to do with what's going on your subconscious level that everybody can sense subconsciously, whether they know they can or not, which is you're serving a distant star. This also has something to do with a shift in paradigm around leadership. Leadership is when you're holding the space for the brilliance of other people. Other people aren't going to follow you just because you're saying, follow me. That stuff's old, and people are unattracted to that because they can sense the ego in that. A leader, a real leader, doesn't think of himself or herself as a leader. A real leader thinks of himself or herself as a follower. That's what Lao Tzu said in the Tao Te Ching, that you are the follower of that distant star, which is then reflected in your eyes. The Course in Miracles says that you then have a light in your eyes, which people who share that light will see as a collaborator. That's why the Course in Miracles says at a certain point in your journey, you will not go forward alone, for mighty companions will join you. Like you're onto something, and you and I can just see it. There'll be just this kind of like, want to have coffee because we recognize each other, this rapport. We both know we're sort of going about that same stuff. And the Course in Miracles says, when other people who do not yet have that light in their eyes see it, they'll wonder what it is. And they will be attracted to it. Because you're living not from fear. You've moved to a higher story. You don't wake up in the morning wondering how you're going to survive and how you're going to make it happen. Life intends that you survive, but life intends more than that. It intends that you thrive. It intends that you be lifted to your highest level of creative possibility. And I can see this in my life. The times that I've succeeded the most in worldly terms, the times when everything's manifest the most in worldly terms, was when I was not trying to make that happen. And anytime you're just trying to make that happen, you're lowering your vibration. And so actually you no longer have what Martin Luther King called cosmic companionship. And that's what you want to have in life. You want to have cosmic companionship. Now, once again, what's the how-to? Well, you're just saying, may my job, may my career, may my talents, may whatever, serve God. And then you say, well, what does that look like? What does that look like? Well, one of the most interesting things in the Course in Miracles is a concept: beware the temptation to self-initiated plans. That's an interesting one. Beware the temptation to self-initiated plans. Because remember when I said, and I talk about this a lot in Return to Love, how God's plan works and yours doesn't. So we're taught, well, figure out what it is you want to do. This paradigm is different. It's not, quote unquote, figuring out what you want to do. It's asking God to show you how you could best be of service. That's a different mindset. Figuring out. The ego is real into figuring it out. But the most fundamental things in life you cannot figure out. Kierkegaard talked about the leap of faith. You know, that's why people get stuck in relationships. Do you want to be with this person? I don't know, I'm trying to figure it out. That's not how love operates. It's what your heart calls you to. But the ego mind says that that's the voice you cannot trust. But Spirit says it's the only voice that you can trust. Because your ego is the part of your mind that has no idea what's going to happen tomorrow. And it's not asking, how might I collaborate with this person? That's the question. How might you and I collaborate for the purposes of mutual enlightenment? Now, once you understand that collaborating for the purposes of mutual enlightenment is the same thing as collaborating for the purposes of mutual joy, then you're in it with life with a big yes. Otherwise, you're going around life saying no to things and almost incapable of saying yes. It actually paralyzes you. You might be on a lot of airplanes, you might be traveling a lot, but you have this sense that you're just running around like a chicken with your head chopped off. So you don't say, I'm going to figure out what I want to do. You live from a place of, how can I best be used? You know, like in the Bible, the servant of the Lord, the handmaiden of the Lord. It's true. You're asking that your hands and your feet be used in a way that serves the whole. One cell is assigned to the lungs, one cell is assigned to the heart, one cell is assigned to the pancreas, and it's assigned to collaborate with other cells. And the cells that go out there to do their own thing and become the malignancies, that's a destructive pattern rather than a creative pattern. So, beware the temptation to self-initiated plans. I've had people who have said to me, you know, this project didn't succeed or that project didn't succeed. The first question is, were you asked to do it? I know when I ran for Congress a couple of years ago, and I had a lot of time to think about what went wrong and what went right. And I was very prayerful in my decision about whether to do it. That I had right. Where I was not so prayerful, although you don't realize it at the time. I mean, anytime you wake, when you think of the biggest mistakes you made ever in your life, you didn't wake up that morning saying, oh, I think I'll be a jerk today. Or when you make the biggest mistakes in your life, you didn't wake up saying, I think I'll just blow this today. But you get so into the thinking of the world. And so I realized that my consciousness was totally in alignment on whether or not to run. But it was not in alignment on how to actually run a campaign, right? And so it's not just what you do, but how you do it. It's because it is so radically different than the thinking of the world. And so then anytime you do decide to do things radically different than the thinking of the world. I'll give you another example for me professionally, as long as we're talking about utter failures. My first book that I wrote was called A Return to Love. And that book became very well known because of Oprah Winfrey. Now, after you have a big book, and this is how the world operates, right? Then you're like making it, and then you got the big publishers, you got the big publicists, got the big everybody, got the people in suits, all that stuff, right? And I remember I wrote my second book. And then, you know, you're in the big time, gotta have a national show when the book comes up, right? You really think you're in the realm of what the world calls success, but which from a spiritual perspective, watch out, because the temptations severe are gonna be all over the place, right? So, you gotta have a national show. Oprah's office isn't calling back. Now I pray and I meditate. Do nothing. No, Marianne, this is your publisher calling. Marianne, this is your lawyer calling. Marianne, this is your agent calling. Marianne, no, we gotta have a national show. You gotta decide. Oprah must not like it. I would pray and meditate. Do nothing, just wait, do nothing. Marianne, this is so-and-so. Marianne, this is so-and-so. This is the head of the company. This is whatever. You know, we really got to have it. She must not like it. So we got to get in there, and we know somebody else who wants to have you on a national show, blah, blah, blah. I would pray and I would meditate. Do nothing. Now, the woman I am today would say to the publisher and would say to the agent and would say to everybody else, we are doing nothing. Because I've learned. But at that time, a mistake I then, repeated in the political thing, because these are the people who know, because they're about politics or whatever. And you're not used to just trusting that voice within you. Well, you can probably guess where this goes, right? Because I went on and I booked that other show, because even though I kept getting it, my guidance was clear. Sometimes we say, I don't know what God is saying, when the truth is, you know what God is saying. You don't like what God is saying. You don't think, sometimes you think, well, God, I don't know, he must be busy with other things. He's surely not seeing this clearly. Right? I don't know. I don't know. He doesn't understand. You got to book a national show, right? So that's what I did, because they just wore me down, right? Which I'm not saying is an excuse, because I know better now. But in those days, I remember how voicemail worked. And I remember in those days, you had a machine. And I remember I was in the bathtub. And the voicemail machine was in my bedroom. It was Oprah. I had already booked a national show. And understandably, you'd booked another one. You weren't going to be on her show. And it was Oprah's voice. Love this one. Better even than Return to Love. Call me. And I remember I wanted to drown myself in that moment. I lost a house or two. So don't talk about how this stuff won't lead you to success in the world. All I had to do was listen to that voice within myself. It wasn't like I wasn't guided. I have seen it over and over and over again. This is not about a path of sacrifice. The spiritual path is not a path of sacrifice. The Course in Miracles says, I'm not looking for martyrs. I'm looking for teachers. To teach is to demonstrate. So I've seen it over and over in my life, that whenever I've thought it was about, doing the worldly thing and what the worldly thing is success, I've seen over and over and over in my life that actually put me in a place of thinking that actually gets thicker and thicker in the world. In fact, with my first book that was quite successful, I didn't know, or even with my career, I didn't know what this is supposed to look like. I didn't know. I didn't go to a seminary. This is how a rabbi behaves, or this is how a priest behaves, or this is how a minister behaves, or when my first book came out. And I've seen in my life how those places where I was just kind of an idiot savant, because I was just doing what the sort of simple love in my heart was at the time. That is where things have worked. So this whole paradigm about going out into 2017, trying to figure it out, trying to get all the stuff that the world will tell you you need to do to make it happen, is a prescription for fear. It is a prescription for fear. It is a prescription for self-sabotage. It is a prescription for doing things and being ways that will not lead any of us to cosmic companionship that lifts us up. And what does that look like? The other way. Well, when you dwell in the mystery, it's so interesting. Because one of the things that the fear-based, ego-based paradigm will tell you is you got to figure out the people you need to meet. You got to figure out the things you need to do. You got to figure out the things you need to get. You know, that's why these days, you know, you're walking into a meeting. I've heard people say this. I know you have too. What's our intention for this meeting? Have you heard that one? What's our intention for this meeting? And it kind of presents itself like it's kind of a cool thing to say. I'd like to submit to you what a really sick thing it is to say. Because why is that? If I'm going into a business meeting, let's say, what is my intention for this meeting? First of all, if my intention in this meeting is to make the sale, let's say, to make the sale, that means the opposite of I'm here for a holy encounter with another child of God. The spiritual way is I'm here, the child of God in me, to salute the child of God in them, to encounter you on the level of soul to soul. If I'm here to encounter you and simply to bless you, obviously not to say this while I'm in the meeting, but to think it before I go in, to simply send my love before me, to say the love in me salutes the love in you, the Christ in me salutes the Christ in you, the God in me salutes the God in you, whatever works for you. You prepare that ground in the morning. You actually send that attitudinally before you go in. You are putting yourself in the place where the universe works through you. If the highest position for you and that other person would be that you get that job or make that sale, then it will happen. And if not, it will still have increased your stature in the universe. You know, the only failure in life is what you fail to learn from. That's ultimately the only failure in life, is if you didn't learn the lesson. Because whatever it is, even if you didn't learn, even if you failed, as the world calls it failure, the same kind of situation is going to come back around again. You're not going to make the same mistake. If I meditate and I pray and I get an answer, I don't care what person of the world calls me and tells me otherwise. I know which voice to listen to, right? But I've listened to the wrong one enough times. Does that make sense? We learn from our failure and we learn from our success, right? So when you are there simply from a place of love, then even if you quote unquote fail, as the world calls it, it sort of increases your stature on invisible planes. It increases if you do the right thing in life. And you are, you know, that's why the Course says some of your biggest successes you thought were failures, some of your biggest failures you thought were success. Because if I have an intention for this meeting, and I go in there, and my intention is to sell you something, then that means that I'm programming my subconscious mind to manipulate you, to exploit you, to do whatever necessary to get from you what I want. That is the opposite of being there only to bless you, right? Now, if it is, now let me tell you what that does, among other things. When you remove the fear, you remove the guilt. So maybe there is a sale to be made. And if there's a sale to be made, that's cool too, because you can talk about money and the exchange of money from a kind of guilt-free place. And it's not a tortured topic, because the giving and the receiving of material is part of the greater abundance of the universe. And so if you say, I'm only here to be a blessing in this situation, it's not because you don't care about worldly success. It's not because you don't care about living a happy life where you can thrive. It's because that's ultimately the only way you can live a life where you materially and effectively survive. We have a lot to do this year. We have a lot to do. And when I say that we need to just go out there and ask that God use us, it's not that I think we are to sit out the drama. It is that we are to participate in the drama. But if we do not participate in the drama from a place of, dear God, use me, then we will be lost in neurotic thought patterns where we will always be struggling. We'll always be in this constant anxiety. Sometimes people live like they're in a block of ice and they can't move forward, even though I know people who are like always living like this, and yet it feels to me like they're in a block of ice and they can't actually move forward. To live from love is to live from this kind of yoga position where you feel the strength of your musculature, but you're living from a place of calm and relaxation within it. And you know, I'm not an enlightened master. I don't know if any of you are enlightened masters. So this doesn't mean we were all there all the time. But it can become your basic mental habit pattern. That's what I see in my life. I'm not an enlightened master, but I'm a whole lot better than I used to be. And one of the things I don't do is habitually make the same mistakes. Because once you've made certain mistakes, which all come from this, The only mistake is that you forgot you were one with everyone. You forgot that you were here to simply live a life where God would use you to bring abundance not only to your particular manifestation you're trying for, but to the entire world. Because otherwise, what is there to even having money or doing any of that? What for? What's it for? That's the question in the Course in Miracles. The Course in Miracles says, what is the purpose? The Course in Miracles says the thinking of this world, the things of this world aren't bad. The Course in Miracles does not make this material plane bad. It says that the material plane of itself is nothing. It is holy or unholy, depending how to the purpose to which the mind describes it. So if you say, hey, may the purpose of this be that the planet is healed, that humanity is healed, that good things happen, that it's the brightest light for everyone. Like I said, it's not that you're some goody-goody and you're hoping that, you're going to sacrifice yourself and hope that after you die you go to heaven. That's not what this is about. It's about if I say, dear God, use me. Don't make this about me. Just tell me how I can best be used, how I can relate to other people in such a way that it serves the good, guide my thinking not only on what to do, because once again, avoid self-initiated plans, not only, and I've seen this in my life, not only what to do, but how I do it, because that's where you can really get messed up. You got the how to do, but then how you do it gets mixed up, because then you're involved in doing it, right? And the more you live from that place, the more you find your authenticity, because it is your authenticity. And then you're in a more expanded place. And you have better relationships with other people, and other people want to help you, and other people want to love you. And you never know. You never know who you're going to talk to. You never know who you're going to meet. Some of your most important professional connections are made at some place that you would think of as the opposite of where you're going to meet some professional connection, because somebody likes you and somebody talks to you because you talk to them. Even wisdom. I've learned this the hard way. I mean, we've all learned most of what we learn the hard way. You never know where you're going to hear something wise. You never know who's going to say something that's going to be the peace you've been looking for. And, our society is really into the shiny things. Shiny people, shiny jobs, shiny this, shiny that. And I'm not saying that shiny sometimes aren't wise people, but I've lived enough in my life to know. There's a play I once saw by a man named Mike Dugan, and there was a line I never forgot. He said, I laughed at who I should have listened to, and I listened to who I should have laughed at. And that's what happened to me, like when I read my political thing, because the people that totally had the information I needed and exactly how to do it at the price that I could afford, they did come to me. And they weren't in the package. They weren't in the package I recognized. And it wasn't until later. In the Course in Miracles it says, is it reasonable to assume I would give you a job to do and then not provide you with the means of its accomplishment? So once you're told to do something, that means if you feel the Spirit guiding you to do something, it's saying everybody you need has already been chosen and appointed, but you have to live in the mystery. You have to live with your spiritual eye open and your spiritual ear open, or everything you need might be right in front of you and you don't notice it. Why? Because the ego mind is going for the shiny. That's how different this paradigm is. So in 2017, most of us being taught by this world, I want to make this happen, I want to make this happen, I want to make this happen, and in this other category, I want to live a real spiritual life. And that's pretty high stress, ladies and gentlemen, because you know what it is? It's one foot in each world. And that's a very high stress place to be. So I welcome the opportunity tonight to submit for your mature consideration that you give the whole thing to God. Just say, God, I spent every year of my life keeping a lot of it to myself and maybe at a certain point giving some of it to you. Why don't you take all of it? Take every day. Take all that I am and all that I do and all that I think. Take my past, take my present, take where I've gotten it wrong, take where I've gotten it right, enter into my mind, reorder my thinking. The most important thing is that you pray and meditate. If you're a student of the Course in Miracles, that you actually read the text, that you actually do the workbook exercises. The Course in Miracles says 5 minutes spent with the Holy Spirit in the morning is enough to guarantee that He will be in charge of your thought forms throughout the day. And if you don't, it doesn't make you a bad person, but it does increase the possibilities you're going to make some mistakes that you'll regret this year. That's all. And then the lesson will come back around and you'll have another chance to do it again. But we're at a critical time on the planet. And it really would serve the whole world for you to rise this year. It would serve the whole world for each and every one of us to, come on guys, come on. Let's be lifted up right now. And we were talking even last week about not coddling our neuroses so much and not coddling each other's neuroses so much, really getting out of the woundology thing, and I got to figure it out, and I got to dress my wounds and all that stuff. It's a low-level vibration. It's a low-level vibration. We can go right into the Gulf Stream. Dear God, use me. And it's very, the ego says, why would God use you, right? No, Steve, don't. Thank you so much for that. Thank you. Like I said, you never know what you're going to hear from who. Just let it be. Let it be. Yeah, really. Well, yeah, welcome to the universe, right? You said welcome to New York. There's so many people on live stream going, those New Yorkers think they only sing in New York. All right, you get my point. All right. So think about your life this year. Think about the dreams you have. Think about the visions you have. And think about the fears you have. The only way you can let go your fears is if you replace them with love. The Course in Miracles says you have a function, and that is to forgive. To wake up every morning and to ask that you see everybody and act through the eyes of love. And you're probably not going to get it right 24/7, who among us does, except the great avatars and enlightened masters. But we can be better than we were last year. And we can dwell in that space of knowing infinite possibility exists. There is no order of difficulty in miracles. And as the Course in Miracles says, there is nothing my holiness cannot do. If you dwell in the space of love, you are literally dwelling in a space from which, as the Course in Miracles says, time and space are under God's control. You will find yourself in the right place. You will find yourself talking to the right people. Things will unfold in a way that lifts you higher and higher and higher, because you will be in the Gulf Stream. And when people say to you, how did you do that? I don't know what you're going to say, but I know what you're going to think. I didn't do it. I didn't do it. Something went on inside me and through me. I didn't do it. God is ready at any given moment. There is no one that God looks at and goes, you? Because God created all of us as one. The Course in Miracles says those in the world who have achieved the most have achieved a fraction of what each of us are capable of. The fact that we have failed sometimes in our lives is what it took to get us to our knees. It's what it took to make us humble. It's what it took to open our ears. That's not, when the ego says, oh, if it's all over now for me, it's sometimes when God can say, can we start now? So let this be the end this year of an entire way of living. And if you're a Course student, use the Course to guide you. Be consistent with it. Do your exercises. And the results are extraordinary. And you will become more the man that you're capable of being. You will become more the woman that you're capable of being. And it's not so much that you will go out and do things as that great things will happen and be done through you. And like I said, you will not only know where it came from, but you will continue to allow yourself to be fueled by that same divine impulse. Because every day you will not become hey, look me, look at what I did, but you will become more and more open to what God can do through you. And it becomes a mental habit pattern. And when we see other people, we will know that we are there to bless them. We are there to learn and to teach. We are there to give and to receive. And we will just start dwelling more and more at those higher levels of consciousness. It won't be visible. It won't be anything of the physical world. But as he says in the Course in Miracles, Holy Spirit himself says, you will not see me with your physical eyes, but you will see such things I do through you. You will not doubt that I am there. So it also says in the Course in Miracles, when it refers to the second coming, means when he shall be perceived. The second coming is when we see him in each other. When we begin to see him in each other, and that's our only desire. How can I see the beauty in you and you see the beauty in me, and how can we be used together and collaborate so that beautiful things happen on this planet? It's not even what you say. It's just where you're dwelling in your consciousness. It's a resonant field of greater possibility. That's what's possible this year. And in the presence of love, fear disappears. In the presence of that higher consciousness, the dense weight of lower impulses simply fall away. And we are part of something great and glorious. And being part of something great and glorious, bigger than ourselves, our lives become pretty great and pretty glorious. So let's take our own lives, just as we live them, and know that there is nothing in your life. Adam's going to join me now. And there's nothing in your life that's the stuff of junk, because God doesn't create junk. It's not that you are going to have a quote-unquote different life this year. It's that you are going to see your life through different eyes. That's what it means to turn the other cheek. Turning the other cheek means see it through a different set of eyes, a different perspective. So if we are willing, the Course in Miracles says your good intentions are not enough. Your willingness is everything. Your willingness is everything. So if you just have even a moment here tonight, that's what the Course in Miracles says, that the Holy Spirit responds fully to our slightest invitation. And there's something, that's what makes it powerful when you come to a room like this, or, any kind of resonance with other people. Because the Course in Miracles says ideas grow stronger when they're shared. So I'm willing for God to use me this year, and you're willing for God to use you this year, and there's something interesting about the fact we're doing it at the same time. It's kind of like when women who work in the same places and their menstrual periods start at the same time. There's a lot of studies that's fascinating. Or when the heart math people showed that if you put human heart cells, hearts together like in Petri dishes, and the cells start pulsating at the same time, right? And that's why when I was a little girl, a lot of times my parents' friends would go dancing once a week. And I think a lot of people are relearning that in our generation about ballroom dancing. Because you can see why that's very good for couples, because their bodies get recalibrated to each other. And that's what religious and spiritual congregational worship is about. It's a calibration of consciousness together in a very, very high place. It's a very powerful and beautiful thing. All these amazing gifts of just the way nature operates that we don't take advantage of. But we are now. So there's great power in all of us tonight, if even for a moment, the Course in Miracles says one sincere moment where you are willing. And maybe that's all any of us tonight can get to. But in life you get a good sentence, and then ultimately you know how to write a good paragraph, and next thing you know, the whole page is pretty darn good, and someday you have a chapter. That's how life is. So even if you can just get there for one instant tonight, the Course in Miracles says that in that one instant, God himself will rush in. So let's go there together. After the meditation, we're going to have a very special guest here tonight giving a very special gift. On this night at the beginning of a new year, we look ahead and none of us can know what's going to happen. It's very tempting to dwell in what will happen. It's very tempting to dwell in fear of what might happen. It's very tempting to think that the year ahead will be filled with struggle and we must make things happen and we must compete and we must do this and we must do that. But God did not create flowers to struggle. The skies above, the sun does not seem to struggle to set or to struggle to rise. Nature does not seem to struggle to express its beauty and its glory. Our salvation is not a breaking out, our liberation is not a breaking out, but a gentle melting in. So on this night, we give up the struggle, knowing that as we relax into the arms of God, we will be led to where we need to be. We will be shown what we need to see. We will be given what we need to have. Our prayer tonight, dear God, is that you use us, that we might be available not to struggle and to fight to make things happen, but that we might be available to the mystery of every moment, to see the blessing in every encounter, to be used by you to bless everyone we meet, and to be blessed by them. Our prayer for this year, dear God, is that we might show up for you. May we be lifted above the torment and the turmoil of our limited perspective and our pitiful dramas. Lift us up that we might serve you best. May we be the men and women you would have us be, for each other, for the world, and for your loving purposes. Our goal is that we might be who you would have us be, that we might do as you would have us do. Take our careers, our projects, our talents, our dreams, our hopes, our visions, our money, our debts, our weaknesses, our strengths, our successes, and our failures. Lift us from the past, which does not exist except in our minds. Free us to the fullness of this present moment and every present moment, that we might dwell in the infinity of miraculous possibilities, that our eyes might be opened, that our ears might be opened, that we might not be constricted, that we might not be paralyzed. Open the gate, dear God, that keeps us from being the racehorses that we know that we can be. Open the gate that we might fly free and run free and be free. Unlock the chains that bind us, that we might be used by you, dear God, to help unchain the world. May we see the beauty in each other. May we forgive each other. See past the mistakes in each other and past the mistakes in ourselves. That we might be divinely corrected where we need correction, improved where we need improvement, healed where we need healing, restored where we need to be restored, that we might rise up to the fullness of our true potential. And collaborating with each other, form a circle of atonement that is love so great as to heal the entire world. It is to this purpose, God's purposes, that we devote ourselves this year and always, knowing that what we leave behind is littleness and weakness, available now to the full embrace of the glory of God within us. For this, we give thanks. About this, we rejoice. And may this sanctuary within our souls be a place to which we return again and again. For here is our guidance, our sustenance, and our peace. And so it is. Together we say, Amen.
Amazing grace, amazing grace. I was blind, but now I see in your arms. I am free. Amazing grace, amazing grace. I was bound, but now see the truth. Lord, prepare me to be a sanctuary, pure and holy, tried and true. With thanksgiving, I'll be a living sanctuary for you. For you every day. Lord, prepare me to be a sanctuary, pure and holy, tried and true. With thanksgiving, I'll be a living, forgiving sanctuary for you. I'll be a sanctuary, sanctuary, sanctuary. Lord, prepare me for you. For you. Every way. Help me now, heal me now. Ooh, oh. front of me. Open my eyes, illumine me to this miracle of love, to this miracle of love. Ramadasa say so. Ramadasa say so. Ramadasa say so. Ramadasa say so. For this miracle of love.
Lori. Donna DeLore, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Donna. Okay, and now we'll talk about anything you want to talk about. Raise your hand and I'll come to you. Let's start, if we can, because I think, our practicing the fundamentals are so important, and tonight was about these fundamentals. So does anybody have any questions specifically about the lecture tonight and the kind of thing that we're talking about, living fearlessly, living without fear, replacing it with love? Anybody have any? Yes, ma'am, over there. I'm coming to you.
Thanks. Hi. I'm pretty sure this is an ego question, so I'll acknowledge that. But where do boundaries fit inside of all of this?
First of all, let's talk about the ego. The Course in Miracles says the highest level of thinking of which the ego is capable. So it's all, that's not like a question. Anyway, it was a fine question.
Okay, thanks.
It's not a quote-unquote ego question. It is a very appropriate question. It's a very legitimate question, and I'm glad that you asked it.
Thank you.
When you are in a space of love, and any parent knows this, love doesn't mean you say yes to everything your teenager asks for, right? Love sometimes is why you say no, right? If a little baby is playing with scissors, you say no, and you take those scissors away. So love is very capable of saying no. So this idea that if you love all the time, you will become a doormat is so absurd. Because love is capable of saying yes and capable of saying no. You will probably be able to own your no far more elegantly. You say to the practicing heroin addict that you didn't know was still practicing until yesterday. And you say very calmly, very kindly, and with great love, that I do love you and I do forgive you. Now give me back my keys, please. It's a no. There's no shouting, there's no screaming. What you come to understand in life is that when you leave in anger, that means you're leaving from a place where you have not yet learned the lesson, so you will have to learn this lesson again. You will probably, if you leave a situation, nobody's going to treat me that way. Do you understand? Nobody's going to treat me that way. You're in insanity, and you are actually subconsciously going to attract someone who's going to treat you exactly that way. Because your own love was not able to just set the boundary, healthy yes and a healthy no. The most powerful people, you learn a lot in life by emulating the people who get it right. And the most powerful people I've known in life just calmly know how to say yes and no. Just calmly know how to say no, I won't be doing that. No, I won't be going. Thank you. There's no craziness around it. So the idea, the ego promulgates this idea that love will somehow destroy your brain cells and make you weak. And that's what you come to see from all this. The ego is what makes you weak. The fact that you're so dramatic about it doesn't mean you're necessarily strong, right? You're very strong, you just didn't waste energy, you just left. Does that make sense? Doesn't that make sense? Okay, does that answer your question?
Perfectly.
Cool.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Yes, ma'am. We've got Steve's coming to you with the mic right now.
I've been reading some of the Course in Miracles. I just started, and I grew up with this idea of Satan.
Satan. Okay.
And ego and Satan. I studied psychology, so I have like this dichotomy going on in my mind, and it's a struggle every day for me to just like let go of Satan.
Okay.
Or whatever he is.
I got it.
So.
Okay. So I remember actually there was a moment. Marianne, you don't have to worry about the devil. You don't have to worry about Satan. There's nothing out there stalking the planet, trying to grab men's souls. That's all in your head. And then I remember thinking, shit, that is like the worst place it could possibly be. That's what you understand. No, there's nothing out there. It's in here. It is a force of consciousness that dwells within us all until the moment of complete enlightenment, which is the voice of fear. And so in a way, and you're not supposed to be afraid of it, the Course says, because actually it's a mortal hallucination. But the way energy of consciousness operates is that you have unlimited power in your consciousness, but you have free will, which means freedom of thought. But your mind is so powerful. It's not that Satan's powerful, it's that you're powerful. So when you do not proactively use your mind for purposes of love, that same mental energy will be used for purposes of fear. So you can mismanage your thinking, but you cannot diminish its power. Does that make sense? And as I think I said earlier tonight, the Course in Miracles says the ego speaks first and the ego speaks loudest because the ego's mindset dominates the planet and has for a very long time. So it's not that there's something out there separate from yourself, but it is a statement that your mind, when it is not given to the purposes of love, becomes a destroyer, beginning with the destroyer of your inner peace. I mean, I think one of the things about the higher consciousness community, our shadow, is our denial of the shadow. I mean, what are you talking? I mean, look, we have 5,000 to 7,000 nuclear bombs, but we have an incoming president who says we need more. We have, and this is, please, I'm not personalizing this because this last president hasn't been that much better on this issue. But could we just take a moment to talk about how insane this is? So like, this is where our resources go? Do you know, we'd all be dead so many times over. And we'd be dead so many times over. Just a few of those things. Given how big, I mean, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the bombs in Hiroshima and Nagasaki are like nothing in power compared to the smallest ones that exist today. So clearly there's something. So when sort of higher consciousness people say, oh, we don't believe in that stuff. No, we don't believe that there's something outside us. But let me tell you something. As the Course in Miracles says, the ego is suspicious at best and vicious at worst. Let's go back to the AA paradigm, okay? Anybody who's familiar with the whole concept of alcohol or drug addiction, the purpose of alcoholism or drug addiction is not just to inconvenience you, it is to kill you. The whole point here is that if you're really addicted to substance abuse like that, it's not just like, oh, it would be nice to get on top of this. It's that if I allow this to completely take over, it will or could at least kill me. So addiction, and when you talk in terms of addiction to a substance, is just one form. So we are addicted. It is as though we are addicted to this concept of fear. So on one hand, I could say, oh no, we don't believe in that. But that doesn't mean that we do not acknowledge the metaphysic at play here, which is the power of the mind of fear. Does that make sense? So the Course in Miracles stays away from language like devil and Satan because it is so redolent with imagery that does not serve. And it stays with ego because it's explaining the laws of consciousness in a in a way that just talks about how that's the way the mind operates. Does that make sense? So, like for instance, when, if I keep praying and, I get do nothing, and, some ways of the world tell me to do something else that turns out to be stupid later, you could say, well, the devil made me do it, which on one hand, that's silly. On another hand, well, yes, and. Does that make sense? Okay. Yes.
Thank you.
This question kind of fits into exactly what you were just talking about. You were saying it's not just what you do, it's how you do it. And I really feel like I'm consciously being called higher, but I have a very clever ego in the sense that it's always telling me my way is the way of love. And it really sabotages me in hearing my inner spiritual calling of where I want to go. And it says, no, we know what love is. And your ego, and it sabotages me. And I get very confused. So I feel like I have one leg in and one leg out, and it feels like you're going crazy.
Your point is very well taken. I mean, there were witches, so-called witches, I mean, the word meant wise woman. Women burned at the stake by inquisitors who thought they were doing the loving thing. I mean, great evil has been perpetrated on this planet and still is by people who think that they know what the loving thing to do is. So for those of us on this path, nothing could be a more significant issue. Because for me to say, oh, I know what love would do is very different than I'm going to pray about this and ask what to do. Mm-hmm. And that's why we do the workbook. For those of us who are Course in Miracles students, the principles of the Course in Miracles says, become tools in your problem-solving repertoire. So as a Course in Miracles student, for instance, I wouldn't say, I know what love says here. I would say, okay, Marianne, now, and I would start setting principles to myself. Only what you are not giving can be lacking in any situation. Check. Right? What am I not giving? Where are you looking what the other person isn't doing rather than asking what you're not giving? Check. Who are you withholding love and forgiveness from? Who are you trying to control? What are you doing that that you actually go through principles rather than, oh, I know what love would have me do. The ego loves religion. The ego loves to take this, because the ego that's why, once again, going back to the old Christian language, interesting, silver-tongued devil. It's very silver-tongued. The ego never pronounces itself. Can be very confusing.
So when you actually, that's where my confliction is even when I ask sometimes the discernment of, which voice is this? Is this my higher consciousness of the calling of my spiritual, of who I am? Or is this my ego going... We just ask, and by the way, I'm going to jump in here anyway. Here.
The Course in Miracles says the Holy Spirit speaks through your brothers, so that's partly why you have friends, therapists, teachers, etc. You run things by other people, right? Books and friends and people who, what are your thoughts? I'm going to tell you this situation. What is your take on this, right? We go through that all the time while we're seeking, because sometimes people who aren't in the situation are clearer about it than we are. Okay, that's number one. Number two, when you don't know, do nothing. When you don't know, sometimes it's the answer just isn't here yet. Sometimes it's, as I said before, you do know, you just don't like what you know. Does that make sense? And I think, one of the best I remember somebody saying to me early in my career about business meetings, and it was one of the best advice I ever got. Marianne, you don't have to say anything. You can just listen. You get to go think about it. You don't have to say anything. That was such a lesson in power, right? I think sometimes we really mess with things by talking too much. And we don't know that whether it's a personal situation or a professional situation, we can say, I'm going to think about this. Thank you so much. I'll get back to you. Does that make sense? It's one of those things, what do the most powerful people do? Some of the most powerful people I know, like I said before, own their yes, own their no, and aren't always talking. Now, they might say, that might not be in their conceptualization that they went and prayed about it, but they reflected about it, whatever. Does that make sense? Because that's just part of the lack of impulse control with which so many of us are. The ego wants to act, 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 and sometimes non-action is very powerful. Make sense? Okay, who's next? Yes, ma'am, this lady right here.
You were talking about self-initiated plans.
Yes.
And doing nothing.
Yes.
But I felt like if I do that, then I just won't get out of bed ever.
Excellent point. Okay. So let's talk about that. Yes, you will. Because there's a planet to save. And at this point, a country to save. Right? And you will be used. And if there's a line in the Course in Miracles where it says at the highest level of consciousness, I need do nothing. But that's not saying you're going to just stay and be a couch potato and never get out of bed, although there might be a period of time when a few days in bed would be a very good idea for you. Let's say you're very depressed, you're going through something. Not every day is rah, rah, rah. We don't give enough credence to downtime. Because it's like when a woman is pregnant, let's say a woman got pregnant, in the first 3 months, you can't see anything, and that's when most everything is happening. So sometimes your most creative processes are occurring when you're just walking down the street. We don't give ourselves enough time to just be in this society. That's why we also don't have enough vacation time. We don't value that there's a lot to be said for times when it's not scheduled, you're just hanging, you're just lying around the house, because that's when stuff's going on inside. So it's part of the yin and the yang. And when you are doing the kind of thing that I'm talking about, where you are doing your workbook exercise, you're doing or whatever your spiritual path is, there will be an electric impulse within you. It's almost like the voice for God, get out of bed, when it's time to get out of bed. The ego is that which would have you thinking about plans so much, but never doing anything.
And feeling guilty.
It just gets you all, like I said, you're running around like a chicken with your head chopped off. The ego, I should do this. No, maybe I should do that. No, I got to do this. No, maybe I should do that. No, I should really do that. Maybe I should go to the library and find out a book about that. No, look that up on the internet. I should do that. Maybe I should call, and you never do anything. Because you're just a bundle of, it's adrenaline. It's the difference between white sugar and real nourishment. The ego's plans, it's adrenaline based. It's like just a lot of white sugar, but it's not really creativity. And then that increases your despair because you feel you tried so hard and you worked so hard and it didn't get you anywhere. Because it was not following cosmic guidance. And when it's following cosmic guidance, it's interesting. I remember I heard Werner Erhard once. I never saw him live. But I saw him on it was many, many years ago, and he was in a video. And he told a story that I thought was so powerful. He, at one point, and for those of you who might not know, he's the founder of EST, which then became Landmark. And for those of you who aren't old enough to know, none of this would be happening if it hadn't been for this man named Werner Erhard, who started the EST training back in the 70s, I think. We've all been affected. I never even took EST, and I see how much it changed things for me. It was just in the air, and it gave an impulse to all this, right? Those of us who are old enough to remember, it's just true. Anyway, he said that there had been a time in his life when he got into race car driving. And he went to some conference for race car drivers. And after a session or something, he was down in the bar with all these really, really famous race car drivers. And they were talking about it. And he said, I was so excited to be around these guys because what's it like to be around people who drive at those high speeds? And then he said that as he listened to them, he realized that to them, when they were race driving at those speeds, it was like just relaxing in their living rooms. And I've noticed that at my most creative moments, it's a relaxed moment. So don't undervalue relaxation. Does that make sense? Because in your highest, what you want to be, and that's why the Course in Miracles talks about how when you meditate, you retreat into a state of peace. But the more you do this, you go out into the world and you take your peace with you. And that's why we were talking about how nobody has any impulse control today. You know, Blaise Pascal, the French philosopher, said, every problem in the world stems from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone. So it's only the ego, you know, if you can't get out of bed for 3 days, good, because the 3 days after that, you're going to be kicking ass. You needed that rest. Does that make sense? No space is like in a painting. You know, sometimes the empty space is very important. In a great acting performance, when somebody doesn't say anything, you look at really great actors, you know, sometimes like the Marlon Brandos and people like that, and sometimes you watch their performance and it's those moments when they didn't say anything. The empty spaces in life are very important, the so-called empty spaces in life. That's Eckhart Tolle. Eckhart Tolle? Well, he knows. Okay? Yes.
I just want to say that I'm very happy to see you. I met you in 2014 in Los Angeles at the Sebastian Theater. My friend at the time took me and was like, just come with me and listen. And I needed help at that moment. And he took me, and the moment that I heard your voice, and you know, I left and I was like, let me think about this. And I came back again and again, and I picked up the book and I started doing the workshop. And for the whole year 2014, I did it, and it changed my life drastically. And I moved to New York 2 years ago, and I continue to watch you live stream, but now I'm really happy that you're here. And yesterday I was walking by and I saw the sign and I was like, I might have time to go see her. And then today at work, everything was just popping up about you, and I was like, I have to go see her. And I'm just really happy that,
Well, I'm
really
glad.
happy that
I'm
you're
honored.
here.
Thank you.
It makes me feel really good to see you.
Thank you very, very much.
Definitely.
Honored. Thank you. Yes, sir.
I believe in both karma and free will, but my
Okay.
mind sometimes tells me it's one or the other. And it was nice to watch you living the teachings the way you handled that situation
you.
before.
Yeah, she just had a song to sing for us. Why? The mind goes, she shouldn't. Why not? It's only a preconceived notion. I'm giving a lecture. I mean, it's so like how life is. No, I'm giving a lecture now, and I certainly appreciate the consciousness of people who wanted to protect me. That I do. I do. But it is interesting how that works, right? Why not? So we didn't know we were going to have a song in that moment, but we had a song in that moment, right? So let's talk about that, if we may, the whole karma, free will thing. All that karma means is cause and effect. Karma is cause and effect. Every cause has an effect. And so whether you're talking about it as the effect, the karma in this lifetime, or the cause, you know, if you're thinking about it in terms of other lives, but it's all the same thing, it's cause and effect. Buddha came about 500 years before Jesus. The message of Buddha was action, reaction, karma. The message of Jesus about 500 years later, and this, of course, came from Judaism, which was thousands of years, was basically atonement, or as Buddha would, Jesus, in a moment of grace, the karma is burned. So it is my karma. If I have not been, let's say I haven't been cool to men, I've been really unkind to men, and then I get involved with you, and you are unkind to me in ways that I've been unkind to a lot before. And somebody says, well, Marianne, it's your karma. That was bound to happen to you. You know, you've treated other people's hearts that way, so it was bound to happen to you. Somebody was going to do it to you. Free will means I can learn the lesson. Free will means I can get that and atone and seek to be different. So it's not either or. We are always experiencing the effects, the cause of which were planted before. And sometimes it's good. It's like, wow, I must have done something good in my life to get a friend like you. And then the issue is to take it higher. Sometimes it might not be so good, and I have to look and see, well, what was my karma? What was my cause coming into this that contributed to this? But I can change it. I can learn. So from a course perspective, it's not either or. It's very much both and. Does that make sense? The fact that something happened in another life and now I'm experiencing this, the Course in Miracles would say, even if you conceptualize it as past life, and the Course doesn't take a stand on that. But the point is, even if it did come up from the past because it's quote-unquote karma, that doesn't mean it's locked in. It's how I experience it that will determine whether or not I stay locked in it or actually transcend the pattern to start a new cause. Does that make sense? Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Is it possible to love the ego? Because sometimes I feel like when we talk about the ego, it's like the great enemy, and it can also sort of make you a bit insane because you're like fighting yourself.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. By the way, I want to go back, if I may, I want to go back to something else about that woman who was singing. The message of the Course in Miracles is that nothing we could be talking about is as important as her. That's the message of the Course. It's that she's a human being. And that even if there had been a problem there of some kind and she was singing too long and she wouldn't, then our handling that very kindly would have been more important than any lecture we could possibly be hearing or giving. That's the message of the Course. Okay, now, this has to do with semantics and how the word is used. Like I had a therapist once in my life who talked about negative ego and positive ego and all of that. It's just a different way the word is used. The way the word is used in the Course in Miracles is the idea of a separated self. So the Course does say, do not fear the ego, because all it is a decision. You can just choose again. Does that make sense? The place where I can relate to that is the Course in Miracles. One of my favorite words is mercy. And the reason mercy is so powerful is because it doesn't mean you didn't do anything wrong. It just means you have some mercy on yourself. It doesn't mean they didn't do something wrong. Just have some mercy. Mercy is very powerful because it means, I get that you messed up, or I get that I messed up, but we're going to have some mercy here. So I think that the Course in Miracles, and the Course in Miracles saying, be infinitely compassionate towards someone, because in a moment when they were not expressing their love, they were literally not in their right mind. If that compassion belongs to others, it also belongs to ourselves. So I have to look at something like the kinds of mistakes that I talked about tonight, a couple of major professional errors in my life that cost me a lot professionally, right, and materially. But so you say, well, my ego did that. But if you go into just self-hatred, the Course in Miracles, this is an interesting thing about remorse. You don't want to have no remorse, because only a sociopath has no remorse. And the Course in Miracles says discomfort will be temporarily aroused, which means you'll feel a bad conscience. It's a good thing. I hate it when people say, oh, don't feel bad. Sometimes you should feel bad. Sometimes you made a mistake that hurt you, it might have hurt someone else, and you're feeling bad about that for a few days is quite okay, right? But the Course in Miracles says that in the natural order of things, discomfort will be aroused, but but then you atone for the error. You seek to learn from it, you seek to make amends, to become better. You atone to God, you ask for forgiveness, you do your spiritual work around it. And then you rise up to know that next time out, this will be used for some good. So you don't hate your ego. You have mercy on yourself. I have mercy on when I think of some of the ways that I've blown it in my life, more in my personal relationships than professionally, is nothing compared to how we hurt ourselves personally. You have compassion. I remember there was something in my personality, and you said it and I didn't want to hear it, and you said it and I didn't want to hear it. And finally, about the time the fourth person said it and they didn't know each other, there must be something I need to look at, right? And you notice that you don't want to look at these things because you're afraid you'll be overwhelmed by self-hatred. But when I actually had to look at it, I thought, wow, I had to have really been hurt as a child that I developed that as a coping mechanism. And you actually have compassion for yourself. So I think ultimately the ego is something that you don't hate yourself for, but you hold yourself accountable to. Because you realize whether it's you or someone else, it's no different. Obviously, if you hurt me, it's not because you woke up this morning and said, I want to hurt Marianne. It's because you were acting out of some childhood wound. Just like if I hurt myself, I was acting out of some childhood wound. You have mercy, but you also hold yourself and others accountable. It's both and, like the karma and the free will thing. So yeah, you don't hate your ego, but you do realize that this will hurt me if I do not seek to transcend this. Does that make sense? Yes, ma'am.
When I look at my past life and other people, I see that sometimes very bad things come to outcome very good. So it was
very bad things. What?
It was very
put
like
the mic a little closer to your mouth.
Okay, kind of like hostile environment or something good, very good, or light came out of that bad force.
Good came from the bad?
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. There's no doubt about that.
So then this brings the next question that where is the limit, like is end of the suffering? Because as everything goes now in a spiritual level, maybe it wouldn't bring that good really out of...
If I understand what you're saying, and I'm not sure that I am, but tell me. You know, there's a line, it's not from the Course in Miracles, I think it was Sandra Ray who said it, love brings up everything unlike itself. And there's a lot of talk about that in this country right now. Stuff's coming up that was already there, but it's coming up for review, as the Course in Miracles would say. It has been harnessed for political purposes, etc. What is the good that can come from this? The good that can come from this is that we can choose that that is not what we want. Does that make sense? Somebody said the other day about someone politically that I was disagreeing with, well, maybe he's here to teach us. Yeah, well, we better learn it. I mean, the point is not just he's here to, I mean, if it's just shown to us, the point is, do we decide against it? I mean, you could say that about anything on the planet. You could say that about genocide. Yeah, does it teach us? Yes. You know, genocide is actually an interesting example because it wasn't until the 20th century that there was actually consensus among the nations of the world that genocide should not happen. I mean, it took till the 20th century for there even to be a group consciousness that said, yeah, that shouldn't happen. But notice how it's still happening. There's still Darfur and so forth. Now, or Rwanda occurred, et cetera. So collectives progress the way individuals do. Sometimes you know you shouldn't do something, but still it takes a while before you stop doing it. So it has to come up. You have to suffer from it. You have to go through the consequences enough before you get to the point of choosing that this no longer occur. The Course in Miracles talks about the Last Judgment. And the way the ego interprets that is you're going to stand before God and he's going to, you know, tell you what a mortal sinner you are or whatever. The Course in Miracles says that's not the Last Judgment. The Last Judgment is when you stop judging. Get it? That's a good thing. And it comes up because you see the consequences, i.e. the karma of your life, and you judge, is this worthy of me? Is this who I want to be? That really becomes the spiritual question. Who do you want to be? Is this who you want to be? Really? And I think that's, you know, and that's a very different paradigm than, oh, I got to work this out, or I got to stay forever figuring out the wound that got me here. It's very immature, that conversation. A much more mature conversation is, well, given how I'm dwelling in my life, given how I'm thinking, and this is how I'm behaving, this is what I got. Is this who I want to be? Is this the lover I want to be? Is this the friend I want to be? Is this the wife I want to be? Is this the husband I want to be? Is this the parent I want to be? Is this the citizen I want to be? It's very different than a lot of the stuff that's out there these days. Does that make sense? Where it's all about my hurt and my whatever. It's an adult decision. So when you say bad things come up, yeah, but in our own lives and in the world, and we get to choose, is this what we want? And when you look at some of what's happening in our country today, you look at the fear and you look at the hate that have been harnessed for political purposes. Once again, we hadn't harnessed love. We just sort of thought we could cruise. And you can't. You can't cruise in the life of a nation any more than you can cruise in the life of an individual. Because if you are not You know, it's like with physical exercise. If you're not working at keeping those muscles up, they're headed down. If you're not keeping your thoughts, your society on a high plane, gravity pulls it down. Fear will be more than glad to take over wherever you do not fill the house with love. You know, just never, you know, we just keep our windows open and our doors open and wonder how the thief came in. Does that make sense? So in that sense, yes. It didn't have to get this bad, but we chose for it to get this bad. Now, that's why I said earlier, the issue is not who the president-elect is going to be next year, it's who are we going to be next year. It's, you know, the bigger issue, ultimately, in life is not just slaves, but abolitionists, right? The issue is the response. Yes, ma'am, over there.
It's a difficult four-letter word to say because love is such an easier one to say, but you never bring up the word hate, and I know it's an ugly word, so I understand. But with I was doing some canvassing during the campaign, and that message of love trumps hate, you know, I thought was very strong. But I'm asking you this because I have some hate towards close family members, and it's very difficult for me to deal with this because I feel that you shouldn't be hateful to your family. How do you deal with that?
Well, it's not from a should place. The Course in Miracles, I always say, it doesn't speak from a tone that's should, it's a tone of just thought you might like to know. I'm sure that you are well aware that your hatred of that person or those people are not destroying them, but it's eating you. You know that, correct? There are people on this planet who have lived and do live, who are extraordinary demonstrations of people who, from a rational perspective, have every reason to hate. Immaculée Ilibagiza, who many have called the Rwandan Anne Frank, who during the Rwandan genocide was in a bathroom with 7 other girls for either a bathroom with 7 for 30 days or a bathroom with 30 for 7, but the most horrible, 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 horrible situation you can imagine. She survived, and she talks in this book about her situation. And at the end of the book, she is called by the prison, told that they have the person who killed her family. And you know, in Rwanda, a lot of it was like your own childhood friends. And the prison warden told her, you can do anything to him that you want. And basically, you know, you can gouge his eyes out if you want. You know, you can do whatever you want. And she, because of her religious conversion, said, I forgive you. And the prison guard got very angry at her. And then I think she said 3 years later or 1 year later or something, called her and told her, thank you. When you did that at the time, I was outraged by you, but ultimately I learned you gave us the way to survive. My friend Naomi Warren, who I've written about in 2 books, who recently died, talked about her 2 years at Auschwitz and how when she left there, she said to herself, Hitler got 2 years of my life. He will not get another day. There's the Buddhist story about the monks who were about to cross a river. And a woman comes up and says, I don't know how to swim. Would you please let me ride on your shoulders across the water? And one of the monks said to her, get on my shoulders and I will swim and to the other side. And they got to the other side and he put down the woman and she went one way and the monks went the other. And after a while, the monk who had not carried the woman on his shoulders said to the one who had, I just have to say, that's really offensive to me that you, a monk, carried a woman on your shoulders across the water. And the monk who carried her said, I just carried her over the water, you have been carrying her ever since. And so forgiveness is an act of generosity towards self. It doesn't mean we condone, but God does not need us to police the universe. This is where that gentleman's comment about karma comes in. That person has their own journey that the universe will make sure they take to balance their own journey. God does not need your help. And when he says in the Bible, it says that in the Course it says that the line in the Bible, vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. That what that means is him saying to you, I don't need you to handle this. I got this. Is it a situation that you are comfortable expressing so that we can pray with you or help or in any way? Or does that make a difference, what I've said? I mean, hate is a strong word. Was something taken from you or?
I think it's more something that's just lives within me, and it just creeps in my daily life. And so a lot of the things that you discussed earlier just seems to be relevant because I'm.
Do you feel that
I've learned something from what you said, so I appreciate that.
Do you or someone that you love feel that your life has been deeply affected by the actions of this other person?
Yeah. I mean, unable to be really, happy in life because it holds me back. So that's the issue.
Okay, so this is what the Course in Miracles would say. And it's confrontive. The Course in Miracles would say there is nothing that person did that it can hold you back from being happy in life. Something that person did might make it more of a challenge to be happy in life. But the Course in Miracles says that you were not created to be at the effect of lovelessness, either in yourself or in others. Nothing that this person did affected the real you. No lovelessness can affect the real you. Your belief that it can, because of the power of that belief, keeps you stuck in that. That's what crucifixion is metaphysically. It's that the ego seeks to destroy love, so this person did something to impact your innocence and your love. But that's not the end of the story. The end of the story is the resurrection. So it's supposed to take 3 days. It's not supposed to take forever, right? Or 40 years between the slavery in Egypt and the deliverance to the promised land. Those symbolic time periods are very important. But no one and no incident has the power to permanently deny you happiness. And that's why I look to people like Immaculée Lebegiza, and I look to people like Naomi Warren, and I look to others like them, a man named Dick Gayton, who wrote a book about forgiveness, a man like whose family was murdered, a man like Azim Kamisa, whose son was murdered. You read stories of people who you can't even imagine they're finding the capacity to forgive, who found within themselves that place to live. So the Course in Miracles would say, it's like if I'm keeping a hook in them, the hook remains in me. My belief in their guilt, and it's not, when I say my belief in their guilt, on a material plane, I'm sure they did it. I mean, on a material plane, people do heinous things. There is no doubt about that. The point is, the Course says, that the love of God is more powerful than anything that happens on this plane. So you can keep your focus there, and if your focus is on what they did to you, your experience of life will be what they did to you. The resurrection is, once again, that miracle where Holy Spirit, God, however you perceive these things, lift my mind. And forgiveness is where God gives you the power to look beyond the level of what people did to who they are. Because remember, if it's not loving, it's only happening within this three-dimensional illusion. And that is not to deny your pain or to invalidate your pain. But it is to challenge us to know that this does not have to last forever. That grief is a part of life, but the psyche has an immune system, just like the physical body does. The physical body could not survive and thrive were it not able to take a lot of assault and injury and heal from it. And the psyche can take a lot of assault and injury and heal from that too. And so there is no, because of this, I can never be happy from A Course in Miracles. Does that make sense? It is, as I give this experience to God, I will heal with time, and I will place this person, I am willing to see them differently. Because the Course in Miracles would ask that you think of anything this person ever did that was loving, whatever, all of those things, which if you read the Course, etc., you will find just those little things that you can hold on to and know that those moments were the truth of that person. And as the Course in Miracles says, the prison warden can't leave the prison any more than the prisoner can. So because you're holding this person prisoner in your mind, you yourself are stuck in the prison. Does that at least intellectually make sense?
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, let me see, make sure we're okay. One more. Yes, sir.
Thanks. The Course in Miracles you talked about in the beginning of this evening about the fact that my ego tells me that I'm separate from
Yes.
you. And in a political sense, I've been going through this whole thing of seeing that, you know, we have a two-party system.
Yes.
And you know, it's shirts against skins. It's you against me. Mm-hmm. And we're taught to hate that person. We're taught to think that that person's wrong. Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking to myself, that what can we do about that? Because not all Democrats are good, not all Republicans are good, not all Democrats are bad, not all Republicans are bad.
Right.
And the thing is that the other thought that I had was, in order for us to really truly have a three-party system or a four-party system, we have to get rid of the Electoral College.
Okay.
Because if we had a true three-party system,
okay,
nobody would ever get 270. And so then what would we do? So this is where I come from in terms of how do we dissolve this whole thing, and it's the hate that we have for each other.
Well, first of all, political parties are not even mentioned in our Constitution. Not even mentioned. They're nowhere in the Declaration of Independence. They are nowhere in the Constitution. And our first president, George Washington, warned us against them in his farewell address. Okay, that's number one. So, and not only that, in the history of the United States, this whole idea that there are only two and that we are locked in the way we always say, well, we're a two-party system. This is something that people did. This is something, it is not in our Constitution. So what happened in the history of the United States is that third-party voices were extremely significant. Abolition came from the Abolitionist Party. Women's suffrage came from the Suffragette Party. Social Security came from the Socialist Party. So even though the dominance of two parties has been throughout our history, they have been until the 1960s far more loose. And other parties did exist which gave a lot of the lifeblood, particularly the serious moral lifeblood, such as abolition, suffrage, and so forth, to the major parties. During the 1960s, in my book, Healing the Soul of America, I write about this. During the 1960s, in large part because of the ascendance of George Wallace, the Democrats and the Republicans formed a very unholy alliance. And anybody who's tried to run as an independent for anything, such as I did, man, they have so much locked up. And we saw this, and we see it, you know, this is a big thing going on. It's bigger than just the Electoral College issue. Because you don't have to win the presidency. If we had a healthier system where more than two parties were really able to be in there, it wouldn't even be so much about the Electoral College or even winning the presidency. It would be about the ideas that are able to flow in and out and really be part. Even if you look at something like the Presidential Debate Commission. It's been a big deal about Ralph Nader when he couldn't be in the debates, and Jill Stein and so forth. Well, what the deal is there is that a few decades ago, the Democrats and the Republicans basically stole them from the League of Women Voters. So people talk about the debate commission. You know who the debate commission is? Democratic and Republican operatives is who the debate commission is. So this is one of the ways that we have to unveil all this corruption and see. But it begins, I think, with recognizing that the hold that the two parties have on the system, this lock that they now have, is not the historical trajectory, and it's just one more way in which we can recognize what's happening. We also paid a big price, however, in this race. A lot of people thinking that it was better to vote their principles rather, the good versus great and so forth. We all know what happened. All these things, though, I think we're educating ourselves. That's part of why we're doing Sister Giant. One of the sessions at Sister Giant is going to be a little American History 101 class. I called a man, when I wrote my book, Healing of America, I hired a tutor because there was a lot I didn't know, and I really fell in love with American history. It's so fascinating. I called this man. I hadn't talked to him in at least 15 years, I think, and I asked him if he could speak to us at Sister Giant. I said, we need like a 101 class. Just give people like the 7th grade version, okay? Like, what's the Constitution? What are the first principles? And what did the, Declaration say and all of that? He doesn't know if he can do it, but if he can't do it, I'll have somebody else. But a lot of it now is we're educating ourselves. And I think that's what's really necessary now, and why I feel it so strongly for Sister Giant. Just one last thing I'll say about that. I'll give you an example. Of a first principle of the United States that, we think these things are just quaint. We don't even think about them, but that are very profound. And that is e pluribus unum. Out of one, many. Now, a lot of times we think, well, I'm a woman. I'm a Muslim. I'm black. I'm gay. I'm Jewish. I'm whatever. It's all like my particular whatever. Now, the beautiful part of that is the e pluribus. That anybody can be who they want to be in America. That's the American dream. The American dream is that theoretically, that any of us can be whatever we want and do whatever we want to do as long as it hurts nobody else, doesn't hurt anybody else. That's the American dream. Do what you want to do, be who you want to be, and if it doesn't hurt anybody else, good on you, have a good time, have a nice life. But the e pluribus unum means out of many one. That even though we are to be different religions, religious plurality, different sexes, only two, different sexuality, well, actually, leave it on that, right? Different religion, different cultures, different ethnicity, we are united with fealty to the same principles. Like when I said before, you should be able to get married, not just because you're gay, but because you're American, because this is a principle that serves us all. So there are so many things. Our first principles, what our Constitution says, our American history. Our American history particularly because I think right now, my concern is not the dangers that threaten. And I do think that there are forces threatening our democracy right now, more domestically even than anywhere else. However, if you look at American history, this is not the first time that we have swerved. But over time in America, generations have risen up and put America back on track. We had slavery in this country, but in time, we abolished slavery. Women didn't have the right to vote, but in time, women were given the right to vote. We had institutionalized segregation in the American South, but in time, civil rights legislation, and that was people who rose up. The issue is let's not be the first generation of Americans who kind of wimp out on the job of doing what it takes to make it right. So we swerved. So let's get it back on track. And so I think that educating, I know for myself, knowing American history to some extent really helps me know that I'm not just the inheritors of a national trajectory that had things like genocide of Native Americans, slavery, misogyny. We have some terrible things in our history. But we also are heirs of a profound legacy of generations that rose up. As Winston Churchill said, you can always count on Americans to do the right thing after they have exhausted every other option. So we now, we've seen a lot of stuff we don't like. Let's stand up and be what we do like. Before the final prayer, I just want to say that that's the whole point here. That who we were yesterday does not determine who we are today. Who you were this morning does not determine who you are tonight. and that to go for anything less than greatness is not humble, it's arrogant. You know, the Course says you have a lot of things confused, upside down, everything, including arrogance and humility. To know that you have it within you to be great, to be a man, a woman of great character and great strength, it's humble for you to think that, because God doesn't create junk. So if you think that you're capable of anything less than that, the Course says that's arrogant. Because that would be, apparently you think somebody created you other than God, because God only creates the great. That is a humble perception. And so whether it's your relationships or anything else about your life or your country or our democracy or our planet, what we've got is based on who we were. But we are going to be different now. And as we change, we choose again, and we remember that we're one little group of people. We're a few thousand people with the live stream. And there are people all over this planet who are having basically the same conversation in their way. This is a time of a great revolution of consciousness. It's not enough to just hope this time. As we say here all the time, don't just hope, kick ass. Okay. All right, let's pray. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. And as my mother would say, God willing, we will be here together next Tuesday. And also to those of you in Los Angeles, I will be back in LA on January 16th. Okay, ready? Dear God, we pray for Mila and for Gary, for Tricia McCauley, her friends and her family, for Nick and for Sarah Beth and for Michael, for Isaiah, for Stephanie, for Sarah, for Sephora, for Alex, for Kelly and Carson, for Rosalie and Leslie, Monica and Chris, and for Derica. We place in God's hand all that we have and all that we are. Go forth in confidence and go forth in peace. For there are angels to your left and there are angels to your right. There are angels in front of you and angels behind you. Everywhere you are, to your right, to your left, above you and below you, in front of you and behind you, there are angels and more angels and more angels. God himself has paved a path of light before you. Walk in love, and your mind and your footsteps shall be guided and illumined. If any moment of fear, any moment of confusion, any moment of doubt, reach out your hand as would a little child for the hand of an elder brother who will guide you back to the path and will keep you on it should you hold his hand. For this is no idle fantasy. He is here. And so it is that we wish each other well. We send our peace, our love to each other and to all the world. And so it is together. We all say, amen. Thank you, everybody. It was an honor to be here. Thank you.